go ahead and start the tape.
Okay, it's recording.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Plumbing Piping Work Special Meeting for the Examining Board. Today is August 12, 2021, 10 a.m. via the Zoom webinar. At this time, I would like to have the board take a look at the draft minutes from our last special meeting on August 3rd and accept those minutes. Do I get a motion on the floor to accept those minutes?
I'll make the motion. Chris Bowman.
Thank you, Chris, for the motion. We have a second on those minutes.
I'll second it, Chuck. Jim Pickley.
Thank you, Jim. All in favor, say aye.
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 Deny. So moved. Unanimous. Okay.
We have a
So
few
at
more
this-
people joining us here. I apologize. We have Jay Moore, and we have two more people. Whenever you get to that point, I can allow them in.
Okay, we have Jay. Who are the other participants? So I can write everything down here.
We have Patrick Kearney, which we just spoke of.
Okay.
So I will do that. And then Maureen Magnan, Leslie O'Brien. There's Leslie. I think she'll be able to tell us who that is.
Okay, Maureen, how do you spell her last name? Can you pronounce it again for me, please?
Yep, it's spelled Magnan.
Okay, Magnet. Okay, very good. Good morning, Leslie.
Can you hear us, Leslie?
She's on mute.
Hi, I'm Maureen, and I'm the new Deputy Commissioner at DCP.
Good morning, Maureen. Magnet, Commissioner, I should say now.
Oh, please.
I apologize, Maureen. I know of your name, but I didn't put that together to be able to introduce you as
No
that.
problem,
I
no problem.
apologize for that. And I haven't seen you yet or met you in person, so I
Yeah.
apologize.
Commissioner, welcome to the Plumbing, Pipe, and Examining Special Meeting today.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're awaiting Leslie in a few minutes here. Pat, we have Pat Kearney from I believe he's the superintendent of the Manchester WPCA. Is that correct, Pat?
Can you hear us, Pat?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure this out a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay, yes, I'm Pat Kearney. I'm with the Town of Manchester Water and Sewer Department. Take care of both the water and wastewater end of it. I'm really here because I am I'm on the CWWA legislative committee, and I'm wanted to listen in to see what's happening with the meter installing.
Well, welcome, Pat. We appreciate you making the time to come in front of the Plumbing Piping Board.
We lost you a little bit there. Can anybody else hear him?
Yes, I heard him.
Yeah, I heard him as well.
Okay, that was me. Okay.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you, Pat, for showing up to this meeting today. We really appreciate you taking the time of your busy schedule to discuss this whole new piece. Okay, this time, Betsy, would you like to start with your opening dialogue today?
Oh, okay. I wasn't planning on that, but sure. Again, for people's edification, I'm Betsy Gare. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Waterworks Association, which represents municipal, private, and regional water companies throughout Connecticut. As I mentioned to Karen by email, our board is actually meeting tomorrow. Just due to vacation schedules, it was tough to get anything prior to this meeting. We are meeting to discuss a proposal. And, again, we do appreciate all the effort that the plumbing board and the department has devoted to trying to resolve this issue. But we do have some members that just continue to have questions, continue to have concerns with whether this is going to be the beginning of something that is going to require licensure for water company and utility work that has historically been done by utility staff, and their contractors and so forth. So I think it's just, given the timing, given the difficulty of being able to have a discussion in person, it's just taken us a little while to get there. So I do hope to have a definitive position on where we are with this. We have looked at the draft language, and I know people have raised some issues. For example, the issue is relative to the limitation on residential meters. We're kind of reading that two ways. One is this only going to allow the contractors retained by the utilities to perform residential meter work, or is it suggesting that if it is a business that a license is not needed? It could kind of be read two ways. So that has been an ongoing concern. I know that for East Lyme, which is the one in limbo right now, one of the companies in limbo, they only are planning on replacing the meters for residential, so it works for them. I know Norwalk has some issues with that, so I'm hoping to, again, clarify that tomorrow. In addition, in the draft, it references public service company, and there are a number of definitions of water companies in the statutes, but public service company only refers to private water companies that are regulated by PURA. It does not capture the municipal and regional water companies. We tend to rely on a definition that is embodied in section 25-32A of the general statutes, which again includes municipal, private, and regional water utilities. I know there have been some other issues with the draft, but I think in particular clarifying that this does not affect the existing exemption for employees of municipal, state, and federal agencies or public service companies is important to reflect in the regulation. And then a question as just to the process. Is this gonna, be hopefully something we can achieve in a matter of weeks, or is this gonna be a very long regulatory process?
As you know, Betsy, the plumbing board I've made 2 special meetings on this in the past 7 days, 7 to 10 days, and to try to get this ironed out with your members of your association. And I'm sorry they're on vacation and stuff, but we're taking vacations in the future too. So we wanted to get this done for you guys as early as possible so we can move past this quickly. Just so you know, I think that's, I thank my board members for taking another day off of work to be at these meetings, because we are all trying to run businesses and work to accommodate everybody. Tammy, do you want to bring up anything as well in regards to this in reference to the who is okay and who with the current draft, the current information? I was just given some information in the last 24 hours by Betsy on that control management plan. I'm not sure if you saw that yet or not.
No, I haven't. But I will say, I know Betsy mentioned that it's only for residential meters. I think the intent was to make it so the municipalities can go ahead with residential meters with this license. And because there shouldn't be that many businesses, that I assumed that any business would be taken care of by direct employees of the water authority, which are exempt from licensing. And I assume that is why, I don't know if Richard is on, but I assume that's why Richard put in there resident, in other words, up to 1 inch only. I have not had a conversation with him. That's just my thought on what he was doing.
Initially, all I had for information was that there was some type of need of accommodation for the replacement of residential water meters. So that's how I started doing the initial draft that the board has. The other thing I know of is that Aquarian Water Company apparently makes their customer responsible for the curb box, any meter pads, associated piping, up to and including the customer's responsible for the yoke where the meter gets connected to. So you know, when you don't, if we don't limit the residential, I mean, that's quite involved amount of work that a meter installer would be doing in order to install a meter. So I don't know, you have to take that in consideration, whether our definition should be just replacing existing meters, period, or if you want it to include installation or installs, you know, it does start at the curb box and probably a meter pet, and it includes the yoke.
Typically, I'm talking on behalf of Chuck Appleby from Appleby Plumbing at a personal level. I do the same thing for my water municipalities near my district that Betsy represents as well. And we put all that stuff in for them. They simply come in and install the meter themselves with the yoke provided by us with the 2 union connections. They'll supply the gaskets and they'll put the low voltage wiring to wherever it has to go for the reading at a later date. Jay Moore, do you have something?
Yeah, I do. Just in my opinion. So the larger meters are typically installed in a commercial setting. And with that, the service is quite different significantly. Sometimes it comes with dielectric fittings to eliminate electrolysis on dissimilar metals. They also have backflow prevention 100% on a commercial facility. They also have pressure reducing stations dependent upon the pressure. So where that is that's specifically under a plumbing license to do that kind of work. So if you have someone that comes in that's not licensed and they have to turn all those valves and change things, you know, you could potentially have an issue. Sometimes in a critical care facility, they have bypasses where they can't have a water shut off for a significant amount of time. So, I mean, someone needs to be trained to do that kind of work. And that also falls under an apprenticeship. So, you know, in a critical care situation, you know, you don't want someone in there turning valves that's not trained properly to do this work. And also the East National Water Control Plan was basically, not basically, but it says it right in the header. This is for residential only. Never states anything about a commercial situation, never states anything to that nature. So I'm assuming the people that read that plan aren't educated in the commercial situation. Lastly, I'd also like to ask, I'm a little confused why some CWWA members are opposed to the water meter license. So the water meter license is supposedly given to accommodate a situation that we have right now. Previously, before the situation, they should have been filing Chapter 393 to do this work. That hasn't been going on. So do they want to continue with 393 and utilize licensed plumbers, or do they want to get a water meter license? I'm kind of confused. Could you clarify that for me, Betsy?
Sure, and thank you, Jay. First of all, these are the advanced meter installation projects are fairly unique in terms of typically a water company is not going to be looking to replace thousands of meters throughout their service area, but because of the improvement in technology, and this does allow them to provide more timely price signals to customers, improve water efficiency, detect leaks, and so forth. This is something that's very beneficial to the industry. So I think typically the employees or plumbers would be utilized to replace meters on a routine basis. It doesn't happen. Meters generally last 20 to 30 years from what I understand. So it hasn't been an issue. And then in the past, I honestly don't think it's that they were trying, in fact, I know that they weren't trying to flout the law, but I believe it was their interpretation or their corporation counsel's interpretation that a meter and replacement, and the meter is actually owned by the water company as opposed to the other fixtures that are owned by the residents. It's different. And, you know, we did look when this was first an issue. East Lyme was very candid about discussing this in the press. I don't think that they had any inkling that this was going to create a plumbing licensing violation. Now, you guys are very close to the plumbing licensing laws, and I know that you take them obviously very seriously, but I just think it was just a matter of interpretation. So now that and I keep trying to impress upon my guys and women that now that the department has determined that it is in fact something that requires licensure, it doesn't matter if they disagree. That's what the department is saying. So we have to abide by that, and that the creation of a limited license would be one way to resolve it. I mean, the other way I know we had been discussing throughout the legislative session was an exemption. And I think people think that that may be cleaner. But I do want to impress upon my board tomorrow that we are trying to resolve this issue and that we're both trying to come to an agreement on a compromise, and that this is probably a good way to go about it. So I'm waiting to hear from them. I don't think I know East Lyme has been waiting to do their project, Norwalk, another one. Other than that, I don't know that there are any projects of this nature out there. They're pending, to move forward. So we do want to make sure that we resolve this.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. I know Chris Bowman has a question, but I was under the understanding that some of the local municipalities near me have thousands of meters that need to be done during this process, not just one by one single. So I was under the impression that there were a lot and that outside contractors were coming in from out of state, unlicensed, unvetted, to do this kind of work. So that's where we come into it, Betsy, just so you know. It's not just single here and there meters. But I want to have Chris Bowman. He has something he'd like to say at this time.
Good morning, everybody. As far as the installation of, in our area, Regional Water Authority, I can speak on their behalf, or not on their behalf, but what they do require is that you go down, you pay for your meter, you pay for your bracket, and then you, as the plumbing contractor, do the install from the tap. Once the water company does the tap, you run the line from the tap to the curb valve, from the curb valve to your meter bracket outside the house now, then from the meter bracket into the house and your connection. And then they come back and they do an inspection to make sure it meets the requirements of the 4.5 feet deep and so forth, and this sand and this tape. And then they set the meter themselves. Their people set the meters, and then that's how that works. It's not an outside concern, but they have in the past, like I said earlier, they have changed the valves on the house side, whether they knew it or they didn't know it about licenses. And I still haven't had an answer that I asked 2 meetings ago or 3 meetings ago, how many P1 or P2 licensed people are on each municipal staff or regional staff? And Betsy, nobody's given me that answer from your group.
Well, I do know that there are some that hire or that have licensed plumbers, licensed electricians on staff. I don't have any numbers. I haven't surveyed them. I do know that Regional Water Authority actually was just advertising for some licensed plumbers, and they acquired a plumbing company. So, and I wasn't sure from your example whether you were talking about new construction. It sounded like new home construction.
That is new construction, but
Yeah.
that's how it starts. They
Right,
come
but-
in and they install the meters. Replacement meters, yes, they come in and they do the replacement meters on a time schedule. They don't come in and do 7,000 at once. They come in and do so many per year. Excuse me.
Right. Well,
And
again,
Betsy,
under go ahead.
over in East Lyme, I had a job a few years ago on a major commercial job. The city couldn't, or the town could not supply the water at the time for this particular 200 to 400 unit condo that was put in there. I went to pull my permit with the town to perform that meter yoke installation on a 2-inch service to provide irrigation to this property. And of course I was denied by the town for the permit because they still had to talk with the people in order, the WPCA, to do something. So in the meantime, it all got ironed out a month or 2 later. I was approved my permit. was issued, and I was able to perform the job. And that was all had to be done by a licensed plumber. So like Jay said, we come in, we installed the bypass, we installed their 2-inch meter because it had to be with them because of the gaskets and the IP. I'm sure that Pat is aware of what I probably had to perform on that job with an existing 2-inch service coming in with a meter there. We had to put another meter in for the irrigation side of it. So a plumber is very clearly defined in having to do that kind of work there. I'd like to ask Pat a few things since you are the liaison to CWWA. What are your concerns? I know your members are not going to meet till tomorrow. What are your concerns right off the bat, Pat, that you could discuss with our board today so we can try to get to the nuts and bolts of everything, if that makes sense?
Sure. I can't speak necessarily for our industry. That's a whole different thing. But let me do two things here based on my knowledge, and maybe it'll provide a little bit of information to you to make whatever calls you need to do. But first, let me, the normal installation for a meter from a utility is basically what I believe it was Chris who said it from Regional Water Authority. Everything in a new facility that is done by a licensed plumber. When we don't use meter horns in our town, what we provide the plumber is a meter spacer with gaskets. And we also provide what is called the tail pieces, that the proper meter that we size to the plumber. The plumber plumbs it in with the spacer, so it's the correct laying length of the meter. Then we, as the utility, come in, plumb the meter in, do all of the wiring, do all of the software changes so that it can read properly, and in some cases put an outside reader outside so we can interrogate it from the outside without getting into the person's home. That is the normal installation, whether it be a commercial, industrial, whatever, except for the very large meters. The very large meters, as you know, are very big. So those get plumbed in when they're doing the building. So if you have a 6-inch meter, it's not like you throw that on your back and put it in. We, as a utility, do not touch people's main valves unless we're shutting the water off to change the meter. We do not replace them. That is a licensed plumber's work. It isn't ours. That is the work that we provide, is the meter.
So when you install a meter, in whether it's new, you use the word facilities. So I'm assuming that facilities word could mean residential and commercial. Is that correct, Pat?
Correct. And when you
Okay.
use residential, it has a lot of different meanings depending upon who you're talking to. Residential, single-family house. Residential, multifamily house. Residential, a large apartment building. Commercial could be a hairdressing establishment. I don't know. I'm just making something up.
Right.
It could be a factory with a 4-inch meter. There's a lot of different things that the nomenclature is kind of tough here. Then, as I talk to new meters, if we were going in as a utility, we replace every 10 years, water meter needs to be replaced pretty much. We have people on staff that go in and replace the meter. And it's basically when a meter fails, the batteries fail, or something along those lines. We do, I don't know, 10, 12 meters a week. We change batteries, that kind of stuff each week. It's not a large change out. Some of the stuff we're talking about right here is exactly that. We have 15,000 meters in Manchester. If I was doing it all in-house, it would take my lifetime to change all of the meters. So we hire a company, we go out to bid because it's that kind of a thing. We hire a company that changes the meters in a reasonable amount of time. We can't have a brand new system and take 20 years, 30 years to change out all of the meters. By that time, 5-10 years down the road, that meter system is no good. So we hire somebody in 2 or 3 years, they come in and change those meters out. This is where
15,000 of them, Pat? 15,000 meters get changed out over a course of a few years in your town? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just trying to
mean,
get some statistics here. Okay.
we haven't done this in a very long time here in Manchester. And as a matter of fact, in the next few years, we're probably going to have to do it in Manchester because it's been that length of time to change out, do a wholesale change of the meters. In that case, we hire a contractor to do that kind of work. And then, as I believe, this is where the change comes. We're not just doing one-off meters that are owned by the town. We're hiring somebody to do this. And that's where you, as your plumbing codes, your licenses, is whether or not that person needs to have a license, overseen by a license, or have this new license that you're talking about. And I'm using license general. There may be different names for it. But whatever it is, I believe that that's what we're talking about, not the one-off changes. And then they're not really new meters. It's not somebody putting in a new house. It's all existing meters. The person comes in, shuts off the water, changes out the meter, does the wiring for the reader, does all of the software changes so that it can be read, all of the account numbers, the house numbers, etc. And it's all of the meters at a certain size. I mean, whether it be residential or commercial, like I say, the hairdressing, we need to have them all changed because they all need to be read by this computer system. I kind of like not having the computer system, but I'm old school. But that's a whole different story. It is a value.
Pat, can I interrupt you just for a quick second?
Sure.
Well, I got you there, Chuck Appleby, chairman of the board. In those 15,000 meters, when you put out an RFP, since you are the superintendent for the city of Manchester or the town of Manchester, in your RFP, does it require a licensed contractor to bid that RFP for this meter exchange, these 15,000 meters? Does it require in the document, licensed individuals? Obviously, insurance plays a big role, I'm sure, for you guys, is to make sure everybody's okay and vetted. Does it require in your document that they use a licensed individual? And
Okay, again, we haven't done this in 20 years. Okay, it's been a long time. When we did it the last time, we required that a licensed plumber oversaw all of these things, all of these changes. The person itself needed to be trained in changing out a meter, but it was all oversaw by a licensed plumber. So if something came into being, say, a valve didn't work, the licensed plumber could change the valve. That's
Correct.
the way we did it.
Correct.
And that's the way, at the time, our general counsel said that we would meet the letter of the law 20 years ago. We
Right.
haven't done anything new now. In the way, and this is my case, is if the law said you needed to be a licensed plumber, we would go out and say you needed to be a licensed plumber. I mean, we're not trying to buck the system or try to do something that isn't proper. We want to follow what's needed. I think in the cases that you see, it may have been something that they didn't know or didn't do, because it sounded like one company was doing it one way, another company was doing it another. I'm not involved necessarily in that, and I have no opinion in that. I was just saying what we did 20 years ago.
Right, Pat, and so many different municipalities and regional systems have their way of doing. I think Pure, like you allow your plumber when he wants to replace the valve before the meter. Do you allow your plumber to go out and shut off the valve in the street, whether it's a stop or stop and waste like we have down at the shore here? Do you guys allow the plumber to perform that, or do you have to send somebody from the WPCA out to do that ahead of time? Because sometimes they're buried under asphalt. You know, they're in the road, they're in the yard. Do you typically allow the plumber to shut that off on his own, or do you do that? Do you do that automatically for them when they call you?
We do not allow a plumber to touch our valve to control the flow of water to a home. We own that in our town. It's not necessarily like that everywhere, but we own it in our town. We just schedule it. And when if we had a system or a project changing out the meters, we normally have people kind of assigned so they know that if something happens, they could just go run out and do it for the individual that's needed. But normally, if a plumber had to do any kind of plumbing work in the town of Manchester or where we service, they call us up, say, hey, I got to change the main valve. We set up a time when the plumber's going to be there. We shut the water off. They do their work. We turn the water back on. Everybody's happy. We go away.
That's what we typically do today, which works out very well. And that's how I typically run my business. And if an emergency situation happens, WPCAs currently are there for us, or the regional people. And then at the same time is with a 24-hour service, which is nice. And then we perform that valve replacement or put yoke in or put in a meter assembly with the spacer as you described earlier. Thank you. Are there any, let me just check and see if there are any more members of the board with any more questions. I think Chris Bowman's hand is up again. Sorry about that. Chris, you have any questions again?
Thank you. Yes, I have a question for Patrick. Patrick, how many licensed P1s or P2 do you have working for the Manchester WPC?
We do not have any licensed plumbers. We do not do any licensed work in anybody's house other than changing our meter and the associate wiring of that. We do not change valves. We do not do any plumbing work. We do not allow our staff to do any of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Richard Hurlbert, please.
One thing I would want everybody to keep in mind is that if we come up with a limited license, it sounds like it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to residential or commercial or what have you. But maybe if we make the definition, so it just states replacement only of existing meters and narrow the scope down just to replacement of existing meters, so that the persons that obtain this license can obtain it in a very fair way by just showing proof they took some type of basic course on meter replacement or already have 6 months or a year experience doing such work, which can be proven by statements from previous employers or a water authority. So I think that's very important. We don't want to get into a maybe my initial words of installation, maintenance, alteration, repair is all wrong. It should be just for meter replacement only, with just taking a basic training course, whatever that is, provided by the regional water authority or the contractor that employs such person. that's acceptable in content areas to the department. And then we just issue the license without further examination. So I think it's important to narrow down the scope of work to come up with a license that we can issue really fast for those persons that need it, and still be able to regulate the individuals should they perform incompetent or negligent work.
Thanks, Richard. Does anybody have any questions for Richard in regards to that? Cammy?
No, I just, as you know, I'm not a fan of issuing any license without some type of examination. I still think, and Richard, you could probably answer this better than anyone else. If someone did come in with all the proper documentation that they had previously worked somewhere for the amount of time needed to take the exam, how long would it take for them to go to PCI and take that exam?
Well, my thought process on my original draft, although my original draft, as I said, is very broad in scope as far as new install, installation, maintenance, repair, whatever. If we narrow that down to its meter replacement only, regardless of the type of meter or the location, then my thought process is to have them take whatever it is, a 20-hour course or whatever it comes to with the proper content areas of training that's verifiable, and just issue them a credential directly from DCP without creating an exam through PSI and everything else, which would be under section 20-333, I believe. And that's got to be worked into the definition of this limited license type.
But we could expedite that, Richard, quickly, so we can move this forward for the.
Well, I
do this
think
quickly for
if it's stated in the regulation that in order to obtain a meter replacement only license, a person shall complete a course approved by the Commissioner of Consumer Protection, then that's the way it will be, with the advice and assistance of the appropriate board.
Okay. Does any other board members have any further questions for Richard, Pat?
I do, Chuck.
Betsy? Yeah. Go ahead.
I do, Chuck. So, yeah, Richard, I agree with it. It needs to be defined a little better. And I submitted some language that I thought would be appropriate to be installed, to be put into this license. And it stated, under this limited water meter license, any alterations to existing piping systems to accept the installation of a meter shall only be performed by a licensed P1 or P2. Under this limited water meter license, no other plumbing work shall be performed within the structure except for its designated intent of meter installation, replacement, or service of said meter. I think that kind of clearly states you do nothing but remove and install a meter, nothing else.
Yeah,
and I think
I think it should be narrowed down to replacement only.
Okay.
So that we could all feel comfortable that if a person is just doing replacement only, that we could have a very limited amount of training, because it's a pre-existing meter that they're replacing, and they should be able to obtain, basic training, and be issued a credential to do replacements only. That way, it doesn't include the yoke or the horn, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't include installing meters and pits or the curb box or anything like that. I think if you use the word install, and that was my initial mistake, that someone could construe it as if you're installing a meter, you go from the curb box all the way up to the meter. And so to address, and the reason to change it to replacement only is because, as the man from Manchester is saying, you might not do this for 10 years, and then you need this very large crew, very fast, that knows how to replace meters to get credentials right away. And so that's why we need to just make it so it's some type of certification course to be issued the license.
Richard, it's Cammy again.
Yeah.
under the certification, how long would it take to get that in place so that we could push this along?
Well, on the draft you have, I just came up with some content areas. So it would really be, it would be a certificate you would get from a school provider or from a regional water authority that taught the course to these individuals.
Right? And that could be issued within a week.
As soon as they complete the course, they can attach the course certificate to an application for the limited license for meter replacement only, and we could issue the credential.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Leslie O'Brien here from DCP. Again, there would still need to be a regulatory change made. This still needs to go through the regulations review process first and be signed off on by LRRC.
Correct. There is no language right now, but we're trying to see what needs to be put in.
I understand, but when the question is, can that be done right away? It suggests that like that somehow will be, you can do that right away and therefore this can all happen right away.
Well, Tammy's assuming that the law passed or the regulation has passed.
Okay, well.
And he wants to know what our internal steps are to get it done right away.
I also want to just jump, I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but I'm going to. I just want to make it very clear that Richard is giving options to you all, but the department is not taking a position on this. This is something that the plumbing board, other stakeholders, CWWA, you're all figuring out the language that you think makes sense. But the department is here to offer information about the process and what the law currently says and what is implementable on our part. But I just want to make that very clear. So while Richard's offering suggestions to you all, we're not taking a position here.
Okay, so I'd like to comment on that. Just to make it clear right now, the law states that you need to have a licensed plumber do this work right now. And it's been done
That's
without
correct.
a licensed plumber, and it's wants to be done without a licensed plumber. But it clearly states right now, it needs to be done with a licensed plumber
Yes.
unless you get an exemption.
That is
That
The
is correct,
law-
right, Leslie?
yes,
Thank
yes, that is correct. And the exemptions, the statutory exemptions, what has been described in this kind of work does not apply for statutory exemptions, at least with regard to East Lyme and Norwalk. That's
So a subcontractor does not fall under that
correct.
statute. So I have a
Correct.
question, like a Viola Water to New London. Is that a subcontractor or is that your municipality, Viola Water?
So Viola Water is actually a water system operator. They have to have a license to do that.
So are they a subcontractor or do they work for them or are they municipality employees?
I don't believe they are municipal employees.
So they're a subcontractor, correct?
Well, I don't know if that's, the term of art that they use. They're a water system operator. So
Well, you're
New London
either an employee,
contracts
you're
out
either an employee or a subcontractor, one or the other. I mean,
for a
either you're
contract.
employed by the municipality or you're a company that's subcontracted by the municipality.
Or I think just contracted.
Okay, well, they're contracted, so
But, yeah.
they don't fall. So they don't necessarily fall under this exemption at the moment. They fall under section 393, where they would need to license people to do this, Viola Water also.
I believe you're right. Yeah.
I believe
I can
so.
double check.
Okay,
I think
I'd like- would you do
I
that,
think
Betsy?
Leslie answered that. Didn't she answer that before? When she said that you had to be licensed.
correct. Yes, you did state that.
Yeah, she answered that.
But you have to keep in mind, there's an operator license is different than ours. So it depends what work they're performing.
That's at the
So if
facility, right, Richard? They can work in the plant?
If they have, I believe it's a DPA issues an operator license, water operator license.
But that's specifically for the plant.
That's to operate it.
Thank you.
Not for doing work defined as plumbing and piping, which be any pipe. They're not doing plumbing and piping at the plant. They're just an operator of the plant.
Right. Right, but as
Yeah.
Viola has people in houses doing meters, right now, that should fall under a plumbing license under chapter
That's right.
390.
That's right. That's right.
You mean they're going out to customer premises and replacing meters?
Yep,
Yes, Viola water, yes.
Oh, so they're doing more than operating the water plant then?
that's right.
As I'm being told, that's correct.
Oh, okay.
Doug, can I have can I ask a question?
Sure.
And I don't know, what happens when a water company or their subcontractors comes in and there's an electrical bond or a jumper across? Are they allowed to touch that?
As part of a meter installation or,
Well, yeah, because you go into some houses, they have a jumper around the meter for, and I don't know the terminology, maybe Larry
Yeah, maybe
Valerie
Pat.
can help me with that.
Can I answer that?
yeah, Pat, please.
Yes,
Okay.
Pat, I'm sorry.
That's not a problem. Normally, if it's installed properly, when you change a meter, you do not have to touch that bonding wire. The bonding wire should be placed so that the two valves, hopefully there's two valves, on the meter installation, they're jumped from pipe to pipe. And not anything on the horn, if you use a horn, tail pieces, or anything that needs to be moved in order to do that. Basically, as far as I know, that is the electrician's job to do that. It is a requirement, I believe, in the electrical code to have that. And whether or not you install plastic pipe or not, it needs to be there. I think that they're trying to do away with that and go to direct grounds everywhere because of the change in plumbing. Because I've seen them on plastic pipe. You have blue pipe coming in and you have, I can't think of the name of it, but the newer type of compression fitting pipe on the other side of the meter. And they have a bonding jump because the inspector says you got to have it according to code, even though it's not doing anything. But
You're talking
we
about
don't
the
touch
pack
those.
joint, Pat? You're talking
Excuse
about
me?
the pack joint? You're talking about the pack joint connection coming in with the plastic, coming through the foundation from the service coming in?
Yeah, what I'm talking
Jumper
about
with the
is,
pack joint.
we don't allow it here in Manchester, but there are places that you have a plastic, blue pipe or the black polyethylene. And then you go into the PEX on the other side of the meter, and they actually have a grounding cable on either side. And I'm like, that's totally stupid because it's not doing anything, because you can't flow electricity through plastic pipe. But that's one of the things that going to or getting away from metallic type of pipe. This is what I've heard. I'm not an electrician, that they're going to do much more with regular grounding cables outside than to attach it to plumbing. I am personally against having any electrical bonded to the plumbing pipe. I've seen too many live services and too much amperage on those pipes. And I've seen people get hurt from it because they break a bond somewhere. And it's just not right. It's unfair to you as plumbers to even have that. But
Pat,
that's the law.
again, we're talking about changing meters here. There is a concern. I have a concern too. I get what you mean about the plastic PEX on the upflow, and then you got the polyethylene coming in through the foundation. I get that. That's a codes and standards perhaps issue with the state building officials, anything inside the structure. However, there is many, and I've been zapped myself, far too many. We have to go out, get the jumper cables from our truck out and put them on the service coming in, because the insulation, the aluminum cable and the insulation over it, direct buried in the old days before conduits were there, caused the energized copper water line or iron pipe to be energized and then caused injury, serious injury or death to a meter changer. So we have talked, the board, about adding the jumper in a all copper service going forward with this language too. I hope you don't mind that.
Well, let me just explain what we do with, when you're talking jumpers. If we go into a house it's a bonded, or it's a metallic pipe and there is no jumper on it, we don't put a jumper on. What we do is for our own safety, we'll do a connection between the two with basically jumper cables.
Correct.
Take the meter out, put it back in, take the jumpers off, and we're out of there. We're done. For our own safety of our employees. Now, the people that are doing the kind of work as a contract op, these people probably changed more meters in the contract than most plumbers have done in their lifetime, in a sense that they're doing 20, 30 of them a day. They know the meter change out business. They understand the ramifications, whether they have a training course or not, I don't know, but that's what they do. I'm not saying they need to be licensed or not licensed. Personally, I don't care. That's up to you. But that's just my opinion. But they are trained. It's not like you're getting an 11-year-old off of a street and say, here, go change the meter. These are big companies doing these things.
And I see two jumper cables on line 11 of control and management plan for the installation of the residential water meter wireless reader from East National Water Company, LLC. Line 11 describes the place jumper cable across the meter nuts and shut down the valves so they can proceed. And if the valve is not functional, if that was the case in your town, what would be the next process done if the valves didn't hold? Your tech would go back to you or your staff and tell them that they need to send a plumber out there?
If it was a meter installing, I'm a little bit confused. If it was our installer or the installer that we hired, I'm just a little bit confused on what you're asking.
Okay, well, you haven't hired one in 20 years, right? So you from what you said before. So now your guys go out and change meters, which is fine. And if they have a valve that doesn't hold before the meter, so they can't properly shut down the system in order to change it out, what do your guys normally do? They come back to you, they write a note, they get back to you, or I'm sure they don't fix it while they're there, the valve.
No. What would if our meter installer went out to a home or any business and the valves did not hold inside that house?
Mhm.
What that person would do would go outside and shut the valve off that we own in the street, shut that off, change the meter, tell the homeowner, you need to change the valve, hire somebody to do that, and we would go about our business. We'd turn the water back on. If it was broke shut, which happens, as you probably know, we would do two things, possibly. The main thing we would do is say, the valve is broke. You need to hire somebody to do this. It is your responsibility to take care of it. You better get somebody quick, or otherwise you won't have water. And then if they could get somebody fairly quick, we would just be there for them to shut the main valve off and do that. There are sometimes, and most plumbers would know that you can backfeed a house or something like that with a garden hose in order to provide some water to these people till a plumber came. That's very, very rare. We don't allow it anymore, but other companies I know do. But we would not touch that valve because two things. One, as you probably understand, being a municipality, we own that valve forever. If we change that valve, the people would think that 20 years from now, when that valve don't hold, oh, Manchester gave us that valve, therefore they own it and they need to replace it again. No, we don't deal with that. Just like you as plumbers would not deal with that, saying that you replace the valve 20 years from now, you own that valve. So we don't want anything to do with that. That's the philosophy of Manchester. It may not be everybody.
All right, Pat. Hey, thanks for that. I appreciate your honesty up front on all that. And that's understandable. So you shut the valve off, you call your plumber, have the consumer call their plumber and take care of what needs have to be done. And then you turn that valve back on to make sure there was no leak prior to that so they can have their water source. And I appreciate you bringing up the fact that you don't approve a garden hose connection because that's unsanitary, as you know, without backflow prevention. It'll affect the potable water in the municipality. So I thank you for that as well, that talk. Does anybody else on the board have any further questions for Pat at this time?
Chuck, Larry's got his hand up.
I don't see Larry on the list. Larry, if you, there's Larry. Okay, my bad.
Can you hear me, Chuck?
I got you now. Good morning, Chairman Valeries from the Electrical Board. Thank you for attending this morning. I appreciate it.
Good morning. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. I've been listening to all this discussion so far this morning. And I just want to try to address the electrical side of it for everybody for some clarity. In regards to a metal underground water pipe coming into a facility and then going through a meter, okay? The National Electrical Code, NFPA 70, Article 250.53, D as in David, parentheses 1, clearly states that continuity of the grounding path or the bonding connection to interior piping shall not rely on water meters or filtering devices and similar equipment. That's the trigger that requires the bonding jumper that we've been talking to. And when you go in and you take a water meter, as you mentioned, Mr. Appleby, when you go in and take a water meter out and that bonding jumper doesn't exist and there's a fault on the electrical fault on the copper metallic plumbing system, and it's not jumped, there's a voltage potential between the two pieces, okay, and hence you get zapped, okay, which is not a pleasant thing to have happen to the plumber or anybody. So in a case of where you have a non-metallic water service either coming into the building or going partially, let's say you have an existing building, a multi-family house, it's all copper risers going up through the floors, and they bring in a non-metallic water service for some reason, and they tie into that copper water piping system. That water piping system has to be bonded to the electrical as well. It can't be out there floating, because if there's a cable somewhere in a wall or at some point, the current carrying conductors of a cable touch that copper, okay, you create a problem. You energize sinks and all types of things that people touch. So those are the two scenarios as far as I'm concerned relative to the water piping system. So I also looked at and read this control and management plan that East National Water LLC put out, and raised a couple of questions that I don't know who can answer these if they can, but the questions in my mind. As Chairman Appleby mentioned, item 11 talks about placing the jumper cable across the meter nuts and shut down the valves. You really wouldn't place it on the meter nuts, you place it on the copper pipe, okay? On the metallic pipe. Because if you placed it on the, literally, on the nuts themselves, you wouldn't be able to operate the nuts to remove the water meter, in my opinion, okay? I read through the entire scenario here, and I also looked at the flow chart that followed that scenario, which is probably on page 3 or 4 here. And nowhere in this chart did it indicate about removing a jumper cable. And I'm assuming when they talk about a jumper cable, they're talking about in this a temporary cable that the plumber carries on his truck and automatically ties to both sides of the meter when he removes it so that he doesn't get any electrical shock. Nowhere do I see where it says they remove it. So one of my questions is that intended to say that they will install a jumper cable when there is none there? Any jumper cable that is there right now, most likely, as Patrick Kearney said from Manchester, allows enough slack in it so that you can remove the meter. Okay, there's enough slack on the cable. It's not tight across the meter. So is it the intent that if they come across a situation where there is no jumper cable, that they will install a jumper cable? So that's the question. I leave that to anybody. Another question I had looking through this, they talk about mounting the radio in the rafter and secure it, okay, in the basement. And then they talk about mounting the radio outside. And in either case, using cable ties or tape to tape the wire to the pipe, okay? Taping cables and wires to pipe are a no-no, period. It's not allowed, okay, by code. And I'm coming into this a little bit on the back end of it, but something, I don't know if anybody can explain to me how this system truly works. I'm familiar with the ones where they change the meter out, they run a low voltage cable up and outside, they put a meter reader out there, and the meter reader person comes by and plugs his tool in there and reads it and records the information. Is that the type of system we're talking about here, or is it something different?
So that East National Company is the company that was contracted by First District Water in Norwalk to perform the meter replacement. So that is their control plan. I'd have to put you in touch with Bob Flagg, who is the head of that company, to respond to that. I don't know that Pat has actually seen that control plan.
Can I interject a little bit here? I haven't seen this control plan, but the basic scheme of what happens is there is an inside, and I'm going to say radio transmitter. Okay, it's probably the size of a coffee cup. So you have your meter, you have a set of wires. To me, they look like telephone wires. I don't know, they're very small. They go up to this unit that they were talking about that's in the rafters. They don't have to be in the rafters, but that unit has a battery in it. That battery gets the battery. How do I say this? A car will drive by, and it'll send a signal to that unit, which houses the meter reading that's on the meter, and it'll interrogate it, this vehicle, with the computer system. So years ago, you would have a little unit on the side of the house that would basically have numbers on it, and the meter reader would read those meters. Then it went to a touchpad where you just interrogated that thing with a pad. It would read the meter and you would bring it back to the office and download it. Now everything is done either by a vehicle driving by, or they have what's called the fixed base, which there's antennas around your service area in strategic locations to pick up as many meter reads as possible. A computer would say, okay, we need to read the meters in XYZ area. It would send a signal. That signal would then interrogate those meters, get those meter readings and send it all back without even having to drive. So right now, most are doing the two ways, either a drive-by meter reading or the fixed base. A lot of them are going to the fixed base with clouds and things like that, but it all depends on the system that they have. Again, that information you have is probably from their system, not necessarily all the systems that are out there. I don't know if I clarified that or made it worse.
No, I think
Hey,
you helped.
Pat. Yeah,
I think you
thanks,
helped-
Pat. Yeah.
I think you helped clarify it, Pat. I lost a good portion of it in the beginning, but when you summarized it, it was helpful. And I agree. I'm assuming that this is the one company that we're talking about. So, okay, excuse me for making that assumption. But I would be concerned with, I would have some concerns about the situation where there is no jumper presently installed around that meter for safety, and because we know it's wrong, okay, by law, that we ignore it and we keep going and we put it back in the same dangerous situation. And then of course, if there is in fact a cable being run from the meter, which I assume the meter is a little generator in it, if you will, micro generator, that sends the signal up to the transmitter, and then whether it's drive-by or whatever, you read it. And I certainly am concerned about how you attach that cable in between. I don't truly feel that you need to have an electrician there to take and put the cable in, to be honest with you. That's my opinion as the chairman of the electrical board. I think if it's put into a proper training for a limited license, such as you're thinking of here, along with the proper bonding of where necessary, I think that would be adequate. I have a board meeting on Friday, and I can bring this up to our board just for their input, but I would think they would tend to agree with my analogy here. So I'm concerned, as I say, concerned about the jumper not being there and leaving it in that state, and also understanding how the installation truly gets done. And that should be something that I would think, in looking at the draft that Rich Herbert put together, there should be some education on those two areas. So I'd like to see that added to that part of it.
Thank you, Chairman Valeries.
Thanks,
I believe Board Member Moore has a question for both perhaps you, Mr. Chairman, or Pat at this time.
Actually, it's for Betsy, because this is what she submitted. So I got a question. Where's this contractor from that you got this procedure from, Betsy?
I believe the company is out of, I think it's on the control plan, Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's Massachusetts. So
It's not the same company that East Lyme is using.
It's East Lyme
Lyme's
makes no difference.
companies out of Rhode Island.
Okay. Well, this company is obviously from out of state, and it clearly states in their plan procedures that they have things that are not up to Connecticut code to do things. So it kind of clearly shows why their installers should come to Connecticut, get a license, and be trained the proper procedure in Connecticut. So, I mean, it really, this procedure really shows the value of why this license is necessary and the training is necessary, because they do have procedures that are against code, as Larry stated. So when they go install this meter and they tie the wires up with wraps and tape, it clearly states that's against code in Connecticut electrical code. So for them to come do that and have it in the procedure clearly states that they're not educated in Connecticut and on our procedures. So it's kind of evident that they really need training and a license in the state of Connecticut to perform the work.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll share that with them.
Thank you.
Mr. Appleby, if I may add one thing, I think that and I learned a little bit here recently that we're talking about different companies here providing different types of services for the water meter change out with varying thoughts on how it should be done. We don't have all of those and probably never would. I think that's all the more reason that I would strongly support anybody that's going to do any of that work other than the utility, the municipality, that the contracted people need to go through a program of education of how we look at things here in Connecticut and what we accept as codes here in Connecticut. I would also like to say, and I think it was Cammie that mentioned it earlier, about the need for licensing, and I would want to echo his comments too on that from my standpoint as chairman of the electrical board. Whether it's a license, whether you call it a license or you call it a certification, but something that would require some training, so that we know these people out there doing that. They're going into everybody's, we're only talking residential at this point, we're going into everybody's private residences, okay? And part of our responsibility is to protect the consumers of the state of Connecticut. And so therefore, I really believe a license or a certification, some sort of document, some sort of credential that has been issued upon after somebody has been taken a proper training course on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Betsy, so tomorrow you guys are gonna meet. I know vacation is gonna be on a lot of our minds in the next couple of weeks. In fact, on your people and our people. So I believe, after you'll have your meeting tomorrow with your people, correct?
Correct. It's first thing in the morning, so we should be done by 9:30 or 10 at the latest. And I do think people understand that this is a reasonable solution to address this issue. And I think there is some support for it. I just trying to get everyone on the same page. And it's been difficult through email threads because people kind of bounce around as you know, that happens. So I do hope that this meeting will allow us to come up with a position and that we can move forward with. So, personally, I do think this is a reasonable solution and appreciate the board's efforts to accommodate that.
Mr. Hurlbert has something to say. Richard, please.
Yeah, and I'm sure Karen can clarify, but I believe Karen ends up taking this recording and it gets posted on our website, but maybe Karen can explain that process and when it occurs.
About the recording being on the website?
Yes.
Well, what I normally do is after meetings, I will send an email to the IT department asking them to put the recording on the website. And and then it's in their hands. Usually it happens within a day or two.
So then, Betsy, you could share this recording. I mean, maybe Karen can even email it to you. I'm not sure if it's too big or not. Karen would know. But maybe you could share it with whomever, and at least they could listen to all these different conversations that occurred here today. So it might be easier to explain everything that occurred today.
Well, what I
Thank you.
can do when I request that IT does that task, I can request that the board is looking for this to happen, you know, today, because they may want to refer to the recording at another meeting tomorrow, if you'd like me to do that.
That would be good.
Okay.
And is it something you could send to Betsy, or you can't really email it? I'm not sure how it works. Or do you send her a link to it?
I can't, there's a step that IT has to do to take the format that we're in right now and put it into a YouTube format for the public to see. So there's that one step in between. Hopefully they can do it today. They should be able to. It's a very quick step.
Well, Pat, I believe Pat Kearney will be available for our board meeting, so I'm hopeful between the both of us, we can discuss the issues that were raised today.
Pat, you have notes that you took today from everything that we gave you. I know Betsy doesn't change meters for a living, so she just tries to direct you guys. So
Thank
you have,
goodness.
I don't have good notes. I don't take good notes, I'm sorry to say, but I'm sure I can understand the whole logic in here. It's, I personally, this is personally, I don't see a problem, but that's just me. It's not our entire group. It's just the same as you. Everybody has an opinion. But I don't necessarily see it as a problem personally. I think that maybe it's something that should have been done a long time ago. I don't know. But I guess the biggest issue with some people is, you know, they have contracts right now and they want to move on. Somebody like me, I don't have a problem because I don't have a project like this going on, but it'll be resolved before I have that project going on. So I'll know what to do.
You know, Patrick, I just want to comment on that. Their projects don't have to stop right now. They can continue. Just because this is going on, you could actually utilize a plumber right now and have them installing the meters. So, you know, if Norwalk falls under prevailing wage, you could actually hire plumbers and put them all over Norwalk right now installing your meters, and it doesn't have to stop. So the claim that we're holding the process up is false. There is an option. There is an option. They just don't want to spend the money as the option. So, you know, let's not beat a dead horse here. There is an option. And the option is to utilize what's in chapter 393, which is a licensed plumber. And as this goes on, then you can run into using the water meter license. But to say the process is stopped and then halted and dead is false. It's not. There is an option.
I didn't mean it like that per se. Yes, they could hire a plumber and then have somebody else come in and do all of the control work. If you can hire enough plumbers that are out there that need to work to do that. That is not between me or these water companies and the plumbing people. Not at all. I'm just saying that's what I see.
No, I know I wasn't directed at you, Patrick, but it's been said before that the projects are being halted. They're not being halted. They're just choosing not to continue with them. So it's the municipalities and the towns that are choosing not to move forward. There's no one else choosing to not move forward but those people.
I don't disagree with you. And I don't disagree with the sense that whoever is their counsel or whoever looked at the bid specs when they went out may or may not have done their due diligence. But that's, again, not between me, them, and you.
okay, all right. So at this point, I guess we're still on a hold pattern until Betsy, we hear back from your people tomorrow.
Yeah, I will contact you immediately after the meeting.
That'd be great. CC everybody involved if you could, please.
Okay,
Including Chairman Valerie's as well. If you could add him to your list, because that's, I think that's a high priority for our board as well, making sure that that electrical piece is looked upon too.
will do.
Thanks, Betsy. Does anybody else on the board have any questions for Betsy or for Pat this time? Okay, does anybody from DCP have any further questions for Betsy or Pat at this time? Okay, I'd like to thank everybody. Todd Birch too, thank you for attending as well.
Problem, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Thank
day.
you
Look
for
forward to hearing
listening.
from you.
Good day.
Thanks, Pat.
Good day.
Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Everyone have a good day.
See ya.